For this episode, I'm gonna rank all 5 Scream movies. Do you like scary movies? Mr. FLIXTER! Hello, world! I'm Chris Myceny, aka Mr. FLIXTER, and I'm here to talk motion pictures. I'm not going to get into too much detail. I've actually ranked all of the Scream movies individually in depth on my channel, so I'll leave a link for that down below. So if you want to hear more, trust me, I have a lot to say about Scream, but I am going by my other videos and the grades I gave them in those. But I do recommend you watch those videos too, and I really recommend the entire Scream franchise because it's so much fun to watch. Even on repeat views, I can't get enough. It's gonna be a Scream, baby! But before I start the list, just like my other 5 videos, these are gonna be spoiler reviews. Imagine that. We're gonna start off at number 5. I'm gonna have to go with Scream 3. So I'm just gonna weigh like the pros and cons of each movie, and if I left anything out, that's what the other videos are for. So some of the things I liked about Scream 3 were, I liked the basic premise, how they really took it to the next level. It was the actors that were in the Stab 3 movie that were being killed off one by one, but there was 3 scripts in circulation, so that really added to the mystery of who's going to be next. I also liked some of the cast, like Parker Posey as Jennifer Jolie, who played Gail in the Stab movies, so it was fun watching the two of them play off of each other. I also like Patrick Warburton in his role. It was small. He had a lot of funny, memorable lines. Hey, do drop. I also like Jenny McCarthy. She's in a real good chase scene inside of a prop room that's full of different Ghostface costumes. I also like Patrick Dempsey as Detective Mark Kincaid, but I'll get into that a little bit more with him later too. It's not that I don't like him as a character or him as an actor. They're pretty good. I just don't ever really see him and Sydney together. And another thing, I liked how in part 3, how they have the guts to start off by killing Cotton Weary, because it really raises the stakes. And it adds to the whole idea of no one is safe. I did like that social commentary about the Me Too movement because it was way ahead of its time. I did like how they had the chase scene on the set of Stab 3, so Sydney was running through a replica of her house, but unfortunately, I do think the flaws outweigh the things that it got right. Which brings me to the cons. I didn't like the whole finale, how Roman kind of disappears halfway through the movie, and then he reappears again at this party, but he fakes his death. And then when he introduces himself to Sydney, because they don't actually meet during the film at all, she has no idea who he is. So it really takes away from the emotional impact of that betrayal, because it's supposed to be somebody close to her that she knew, that was in her circle of friends that she trusted. And even how he faked his death too. Gail checks his pulse. That was just dumb. I didn't really like how the whole thing played out with Roman being the killer. It just seemed too implausible for me. I also didn't like how the gore was really cut back on this one because of all the censorship that was going on in Hollywood at the time. This movie's not all bad. I gave it a C+. I write reviews on Facebook, and I'll put links down below for that too. Moving on to number 4, I have to go with Scream 5. Thought it was good. I didn't think it was terrible, but I'll talk about some of the good stuff first. I like the character, Tara Carpenter. I thought she was a real strong-willed woman, and she was a true survivor because she did what she had to get out of those Ghostface situations. I mean, as if going through the opening scene wasn't bad enough, she had to suffer through that hospital scene too, trying to go around in the wheelchair after her hand was stabbed. Ooh, that actually made me cringe, and I don't usually cringe when it comes to movie gore because of personal experiences, but that hospital scene is problematic. Since I've been to so many hospitals, I know that floors aren't just empty like that. Like, there's no way they could just clear out a whole floor. It seemed like they just did that just so they could shoot the movie scene. Like, it doesn't seem realistic. They could have had dead nurses just lying around, or some dead doctors, more than just one security guard. They could have had more corpses to just give a little more realism. Like, that's why there was nobody there. But even that, what about the patients on the floor? There's a lot of implications that really make that scene fall apart. I did like how they killed off Dewey, though. They had the guts to do that, and I do have to applaud them for that. Golf clap. I also liked some of the new characters, like Mindy. She was pretty good as the new Randy, explaining the whole requel premise. Her brother was pretty good too. I did like Dewey in this movie. He had a really good role, and it's nice to see characters progress over time. So as each movie goes along, you see it's like they're transitioning through life. Because in the first movie, he was a deputy, and now in this one, he's a retired cop. And he gets drawn back into the situation because of his connections to it. He can't escape it. That's pretty powerful stuff. I liked how they brought back Judy Hicks, but this time, she's the sheriff. It's like their life has continued from where we left off before, and it's nice that they include her. That makes part 4 still relevant. I was disappointed Kirby didn't return, but we do have that Easter egg, so there is hope for the next one. Because I have heard recently that Scream 6 has been greenlit. I had guessed pretty early on that it was Amber, like beyond a doubt, because she was way too cool about the whole situation. And I didn't like how Richie was the killer either, because they did the boyfriend thing before. I was really hoping that they did something different with that, because they've done different things like that before. In Scream 2, they did it differently. In Scream 4, they did it differently. So, part of the reason why this one is down toward the bottom. So, on Facebook, I gave this one a medium popcorn, which would equivalent to about a C, if you think about it. I saw this movie with my sister, and she gave me an idea for a whole new rating system. So for Scream 3, I gave it a C+. So that'd be a medium popcorn too. But overall, I just kind of enjoyed Scream 5 a little bit more. There's still a lot to take in. I liked the meta commentary about the toxic fandom. That was a plus too about part 5. And the fact that this movie has become so divisive between fans only proves their point. It's almost like Last Jedi all over again. So coming in at number 3 is Scream 2. From now on, these are the movies that don't really have too many bad things to say about them. So for part 2, I like how they have it in a new setting. Instead of doing just Woodsboro all over again, it goes on with that whole progression of life thing. This one takes place 2 years after the original one. I really like Randy's phone call. The way him and Ghostface are so antagonistic against each other. Oh. And I was sad to see Randy die too, but it's one of those impactful deaths where you're like, oh no, not that character. I also liked Lee Schreiber in this as Cotton Weary. I like how they gave him a bigger role in this to kind of give a little more context to who he is. And he really wants to just clear his name and get everything past him. And I like the dynamic between him and Sydney. Because at the end of the day, they pretty much have the same goal. This movie has some pretty good kill scenes. Like Cece's death at the Omega Beta Zeta house. And then you have, of course, Maureen's death in the opening scene at the movie theater. Ghostface just hacking away at her in front of everybody. And they'll just think it's part of the show. And another thing. I really like how Mrs. Loomis was the killer in this one. Because it was an homage to Friday the 13th. And I didn't really like how Mickey was the killer, though, because that seemed really forced. I mean, halfway through the movie, it's the same thing as Roman. He disappears. It's after that awful cafeteria scene that seems totally out of place. Like, I don't even know why that scene's in this movie. But anyways, Mickey disappears, and he just shows up again. But at least he was in her circle of friends, so she felt that betrayal. So same with Mrs. Loomis, too. That's why she instantly recognizes her the second she comes out. Unlike Gail, who's never actually seen her in person before, and only went by, like, old photographs. Even though the whole thing about her having liposuction and a makeover seems kind of convenient, I had to make it work somehow. It has to do with things like overall enjoyment, and rewatchability factor is huge for me. And another thing, part 2 has that really great chase scene when Gail is trying to get away from Ghostface in the audio-visual department. And she has to go through this building, but it's kind of like a labyrinth. And you can see Ghostface sneaking up behind her. Good directing by Wes Craven. On Facebook,
I gave Scream 2 a B+, which is equivalent to a large popcorn.
So, for number 2, I have Scream 4. Now this is ranked so high mainly because it just surpassed all my expectations. The first time I saw it in theaters when it first came out in 2011, I was kind of nervous at first, but then I heard things like Kevin Williamson was back and Wes Craven was directing. So with that dynamic duo, how could I resist? The things I really liked about this was the characters, like Kirby. Kirby is my favorite character. Well, okay, second favorite character to Randy, but she's one of the best characters in the Scream franchise. So when I first saw this, I was really hoping she survived. And then you get that little Easter egg in part 5 on the internet screen. It says on YouTube, there's an interview with her about how she survived a Ghostface attack. So that's exciting that she could show up in possible sequels. I also liked how Charlie and Jill were the killers in this one, and their motive really made sense too. And again, this was ahead of its time because this was before YouTube really blew up like that, and people could really make a comfortable living off doing it. And it was different too. It didn't just follow the formula. Even though there is a strict Scream playbook and all the films do adhere to it to a point, this one did dare to be different, because this one flipped things around and it made you think it was going to be like a remake, but it's actually just another sequel. And the overall message for it was that the problem with remakes is they don't actually honor the original and they don't actually add anything new to the horror genre. So that goes past meta to outright paradoxical, if you ask me. I also really love that scene with Olivia, how Ghostface tricks Kirby on the phone.
I never said I was in your closet.
That really caught me off guard the first time. That actually surprised me. There were a lot of good set pieces like that, actually. Like, I like the Stabathon later on, toward the middle of the film, because it both replicates the opening scene from part 2 at the movie theater and that party scene at the end of part 1. I also like how they brought it back home, because 2 and 3 didn't take place in Woodsboro. So it kind of brought the franchise full circle again. And I really enjoyed a lot of these characters. Like, these characters are very memorable. They have a lot of funny one-liners, too. Whisper to me, Mr. Ghostface. Aren't you supposed to ask me a question? I also really like the gore in this one because they weren't afraid to really go there. Some of the stuff they show is actually shocking. Some stuff would make the other Ghostface killers cringe. I think part 4 is probably the goriest out of all the Scream films. But if you disagree, let me know in the comments. I'm very curious what you think.
I gave this an A-, which is equivalent to an extra large popcorn.
And now, for my number 1, drum roll please. Scream. So what hasn't been said about Scream, right? It's just so iconic. There's just so many good things going for it. It's really hard to find the flaws in this movie. I guess some of the flaws would be like Tatum's death. I never really understood that. But she's such a great character and her death was so impactful that you just kind of go with it. Because when a movie's good, you tend to overlook things. I love the opening scene with Drew Barrymore as Casey Becker. It's just so iconic for major horror movie franchises. It's one of the scariest scenes in a movie. I like how it explains the rules of a slasher, but simultaneously it subverts expectations because it doesn't go in the direction that you think it will. For example, Sydney's not a virgin by the time the movie's over, but she lives. But it also plays into some of the same cliches because Randy is a virgin, as they establish through dialogue, and he lives. There's that first phone call with Sydney, how she explains how it's stupid how girls run upstairs, but then she puts herself in that situation, so she's forced to run up the stairs. That's what I mean. There's so many like little things and subtleties to this film that make it so good. Not to mention a strong cast of characters too, like Billy and Stu. When you find out Stu's the killer, it's actually pretty surprising because he's more of like a goofball kind of friend, so you don't really suspect him as the killer. Billy was sort of obvious, but again, they really blur the lines there, and even though he does fake his death in this one, nobody checks his pulse or anything like that. Sydney sees him get stabbed, and then she runs away.
Now that's an appropriate response.
I like how this movie is both a satire of slasher films, but simultaneously, it's legitimately scary. I love how this film set up the template for the Scream playbook, and later on each film tries to stand by that, but at the same time try to stand out on their own. Even the whole idea of fans of horror movies taking their passion for it way too far is pretty scary because it's realistic. And another thing, I love how this is grounded in reality, and how there's that paranoia, that whodunit aspect, and how each different film there's a different Ghostface killer, so going into it you don't know who it is and you have to try and figure it out by the end. That's what's really made Scream and the whole franchise actually really stand out from other slasher films. One of my favorite characters from part 1 is Tatum, because she has a lot of really funny lines.
Please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
More importantly, I love how Scream changed the game for horror, because after this, every other major movie studio was trying to have the next Scream. Hence all the ripoffs that came after it, but not even Scream could top themselves. Scream couldn't even out-Scream Scream.
I gave part 1 an A+++. That's an extra, extra, extra large popcorn.
So that's my ranking of the iconic film franchise, Scream. These are just some of the reasons why Scream is my favorite film franchise. So I'm interested to see if you agree with me or disagree with me. How would you rank the Scream films? Do you agree with my list? If you like what you see and you want to see more, please like and subscribe down below. That's all for now. If you want to hear more, make sure you check out my other Scream videos too. I also really recommend the Scream films in case you haven't noticed. I'm kind of a fan. I just want to wrap this up with saying thank you for taking the time to watch my video. And another thing, just like most horror movie franchises, I can't guarantee this will be the final Scream video. So later on I'm going to do rankings about different aspects about the different Scream films. And if you like my rankings, I also do rankings on Horror Buzz Live. I make frequent appearances on there. So I'll leave links down below for that too. And, just like Amber says to Dewey in part 5, it's an honor. Please keep in mind, this is only my opinion. It's okay to disagree with me, and it's okay to agree to disagree. Just have some class about it. Check me out on the Horror Buzz Live channel. I left a link in the description below. I also write my reviews and put them on Facebook. I'll put that description down there too. And don't forget to check out my reviews on horrorbuzz.com for all things horror. I'll leave links in the description below. If you're interested, please read them. I'm Chris Maitany. You can call me Mr. FLIXTER. And I just love talking motion pictures. Until next time, have a great day. Mr. FLIXTER. And remember, if you're a cinemaniac like me, make sure you like and subscribe down below.